In 1994, when I was still at high school, Toyota changed the automotive world forever by announcing the world's first crossover SUV, the Toyota RAV4. Back then, Toyota and Honda, which followed in quick succession with the CR-V, created a brand new market segment that years later would become one of the most important automotive segments in the entire world. Smaller than a traditional SUV, the RAV4 offered practicality and rugged looks in a form factor that was small enough for city life. And customers? They loved it. Shortly after its debut, the RAV4 EV was demonstrated with an all-electric drivetrain, something which led to the first generation RAV4 EV. Initially produced in small numbers for a Japanese test fleet, the RAV4 eventually entered into limited production, primarily for the California market in order to satisfy the zero-emission vehicle mandate of the early 2000s. Most RAV4 EVs were leased, but then unceremoniously taken back and crushed to the horror of plug-in fans, something we can see retold in the film Who Killed the Electric Car? They were fantastic vehicles. Both myself and Kate Morton-Elliott each purchased one for our daily drivers shortly after both ourselves and our partners moved to the US. But thanks to a whole lot of things I am not going to get into right now, replacement brand new nickel metal hydride batteries were not readily available. And if they were, well, I suspect we'd still both own one. A year after Toyota debuted the RAV4, it showed the world a hybrid concept car that would go on to become the Toyota Prius sedan, a vehicle which, despite its rocky start, has become synonymous among most car buyers for hybrid vehicles and green driving. And it became Toyota's go-to for lower emission vehicles. In fact, Toyota has spent many years dismissing battery electric vehicles in preference to hybrid vehicles and hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles. And while it did make a second generation version of the RAV4 EV, which was another compliance car, actually engineered by Tesla at a time when Toyota held a share in the company, Toyota's heart has never really been in truly fully electric vehicles. Comments made about EVs have alienated many plug-in fans. Adverts have painted battery electric vehicles in a negative light and hybrids in a positive light. And the first generation Toyota Prius Plug-in Hybrid, which debuted in 2009 in limited numbers, combined a truly terrible 4 kilowatt-hour battery pack with a regular Prius drivetrain for what was, very clearly, a compliance car. And as a consequence, most people have shunned Toyota's plug-ins. But in recent years, Toyota's plug-in hybrids have come of age. The most recent Prius plug-in, now called the Prius Prime, combines a practical Prius form factor with an 8.8 kilowatt-hour battery pack for a real-world 25 miles, 40 kilometers of range. It operates as a full EV until the battery pack is depleted, and many people can actually use it as a zero-emission vehicle. Yet 25 miles is still a bit on the low side, especially if, like me, you live out of town, which is where this comes in. The Toyota RAV4 Prime. It combines the popular RAV4 compact crossover with all-wheel drive capabilities, an 18.1 kilowatt-hour lithium-ion battery pack, and not one, but 2 electric motors. It's rated to an EPA-approved 42 miles, 67 kilometers of all-electric range at an estimated 94 miles per gallon equivalent. And when its battery pack is empty, it can manage 38 miles per gallon combined, 6.1 litres per 100 kilometres. And most importantly, unlike the original plug-in Prius models, or indeed the Prius Prime, the power output of this car's hybrid drivetrain is well matched, regardless of what powertrain you're using. There's a 177 horsepower, 132 kilowatts available from the 2.5 litre 4-cylinder engine. But the electric motors, 179 horsepower front, that's 134 kilowatts, as well as 53 horsepower, 40 kilowatts at the rear, means both modes are equally matched. And as I've discovered this week, that makes for a very fun and engaging drive. Better, I think, than the Prius Prime. Today I'm going to share some design features, talk specs, and then I'm going to take it out on the road. And I'm going to tell you why I think this plug-in hybrid is actually the best plug-in hybrid I've driven for a really long time. Since the RAV4 Prime shares its design with the regular RAV4, there's not a whole lot different in terms of its design language. But for those who are unfamiliar with the car, let's take a quick look at some of the features. The first thing that really stuck out to me was the size of the wheel arches on this thing. Obviously this is designed as a rugged crossover SUV, even though it's not likely it's going to be doing a whole lot of off-roading. It has these massive wheel arches, and actually when our camera guy was out filming the B-roll for this, to demonstrate how big that gap was between the top of the tyre and the top of the wheel well, he put an entire lens in there and balanced it on the tyre. The other thing that really stands out is this very aggressive bonnet overhang at the front. It's obviously just above the headlights, which too have that same kind of angular look that all of Toyota's vehicles seem to have today. And of course you have the vertical light cluster right here. It's becoming a trademark part of Toyota vehicles. Walking back down the bonnet here, you'll see that there is the Toyota logo with the blue accenting, which has become Toyota's kind of motif for anything that is considered a plug-in or an eco-friendly vehicle, the electric blue emphasis of the original Toyota badging. This particular variant of the RAV4 has all-round monitors. It comes as standard on the HSE trim, and you've got the camera here as well as the parking sensors on both front ends and that chrome accent low down. The other thing I want to draw your attention to is the paint quality on this vehicle. Now, it's only got a couple of thousand miles on it. This is a press car. Press cars are treated kind of pretty hard, but this has already got numerous paint chips. The swirling in the paint tells me that the top coat is not very hard wearing at all. And if you were to buy this car, or in fact any modern car with the same kind of quality paintwork, I would recommend that you invest in a ceramic coating or maybe a body wrap to keep the paint in as good a condition as possible. At the side of the vehicle, there's another hint that you're driving a plug-in hybrid. Other than the blue Toyota logo badge at the front, the plug-in hybrid badge is pretty obvious that this is a plug-in hybrid. But other than that, and the two fillers at the rear, one for petrol and one for electric, you probably wouldn't be able to tell this as a plug-in hybrid unless you really wanted to look very closely. At the side, this looks just like any other RAV4. You've got the roof bars, which can be removed, and obviously are designed for whatever outdoorsy things you want to carry with you in your RAV4. This car is primarily marketed towards young outdoorsy types who want an active lifestyle vehicle, but maybe don't want or can't afford a larger pickup truck or a full-size SUV. And I think the design language for the RAV4 really further emphasizes that target market. It's got these fun accents. You've got the two-tone color scheme going on here. I really like the red and the black. I think it looks really well. But we're going to go to the back of the vehicle to something that really bugs me about this car, and that is the electric door. Now, I say the electric door, the door for the plug. This is great. It's a dust cover. It's far better than the dust cover on the oh so expensive Volvo XC90 T8 Recharge that I drove a couple of weeks ago. And this one is not flimsy and does not bend, so it looks like it will stand up to a lot of abuse. But the quality of the metal, this is cheap metal work, and it feels like the door is really very flimsy, and I would worry about this breaking off or rattling over time. I'd be interested if you own a RAV4 Prime whether you've had that problem. This car comes in the base trim with a 3.3 kilowatt charger. This version, the HSE trim, has a 6.6 kilowatt onboard charger, and that means you can charge this car's 18.1 kilowatt hour battery pretty quickly. Obviously it's going to be an overnight charge for most people, but it does mean that as long as you've got access to a charging station, you should be able to run this in electric mode 90% of the time, unless you have a really long commute or you don't have access to off-street charging, in which case I would argue you may not necessarily find this as a useful vehicle because it doesn't have rapid charging capabilities. Now I've shown you some of the design elements, let's go over some of the all-important specs. I've already told you about the drivetrain, which produces a maximum of 302 horsepower, 225 kilowatts, which results in an approximate 8 and a bit second sprint time. But what's also important here is that the RAV4 Prime is rated to tow up to 2,500 pounds, which is 1,134 kilograms here in North America, which not all cars can do. Its curb weight depends on which variant you opt for, nearly 4,235 pounds for the entry-level SE variant, which is 1,920 kilos, or 4,300 pounds, that's 1,950 kilos, for the higher-end XSE, which is what this version is here. There are also some differences in interior volume depending on whether you go with a full-length moonroof, which this car has, or not. You can fit 33.4 cubic feet in the rear of this car, 946 litres if you have the moonroof, and a little more if you opt for a standard metal roof. With the rear seats down, the moonroof variant gets 63.1 cubic feet, 1,786 litres, while the non-moonroof adds just a skosh more. The turning circle of the RAV4 Prime also depends on the variant you pick. With larger wheels on the XSE, 19 inches versus 18 on the SE, your turning circle is marginally worse than it is in the entry level, but at 37.4 feet, 11.4 metres, even the XSE isn't too bad in tight spaces. The SE has 8.1 inches of ground clearance, that's 20.5 centimetres, while the XSE adds another 0.2 of an inch, that's about half a centimetre, to that. Approach and departure angles are 18.6 and 21.4 degrees, respectively. Finally, let's talk about size. At 180.9 inches long, that's 4.6 metres, the RAV4 Prime is larger than the original RAV4 of 20 plus years ago. In fact, as Motor Trend noted back in 2019, this variant of the RAV4 is almost as big as the original Toyota Highlander. Width-wise, at 73 inches, 1.85 metres, it's not the narrowest car I've sat in and is certainly larger than the Chevrolet Bolt I drive daily. That said, it doesn't feel too large for country lanes, which is certainly a bonus given where I live. Before we get to the interior of the car, there is one thing I want to show you back here, and that is the onboard 1.5 kilowatt mains power inverter. If you consider that this car has an 18.1 kilowatt hour battery pack, that means that your RAV4 Prime can power your home appliances in an emergency for a limited amount of time. 1.5 kilowatts should be enough to keep most refrigerators operating as long as they're already cold when you plug in. You could also use it to operate a small stove or rice cooker, and of course to make sure that mobile phones and laptops and other communications equipment are fully charged. Living in or near the Pacific Ring of Fire, this is a great feature, and one of the reasons why Toyota is now pushing this in a lot of its vehicles is for that very reason. If you live in an earthquake zone and a tsunami zone and there is a natural disaster, it can be days, weeks or even months before mains power comes back on. So being able to power emergency devices from the back of your car is a real bonus. Related to this, while you can turn the inverter on and off from a switch up at the front of the vehicle, this car also has a camping mode, meaning that you can camp in it if you need to on the road. It operates the air conditioning, but it makes sure that nothing else comes on and keeps the vehicle safe and secure. Okay, I need to be honest about something, and I alluded to it earlier on in the video. The RAV4 Prime, it's not the most luxurious of cars. I mean, sure, this is a padded leather armrest in the XSE version, but there's also lots of plasticky trim. It's not as bad as some cars I've been in, but having been driving the ID4 and then the Volvo XC90 T8 Recharge, I'll admit it was a bit of a shock getting behind the wheel. But actually, despite it being a lot lower cost than some of the other cars we've been reviewing lately, this feels like a really comfortable place to be. This version of the RAV4 Prime has a full colour head-up display, which is clear and easy to read, and I really like this head-up display. I'm not a fan of all head-ups, but this one is very easy to use. It tells me how fast I'm going, it tells me whether I'm charging the battery, whether I'm using power. It's very intuitive and easy to understand. And then there's the whole driver cluster here. In front of me, I have faux analog gauges. They're obviously fully digital, but they move like analog gauges, and so I can opt to read the speed off the speedometer here, which is analog, or I can opt to read the digital one that's from the head-up display. And I opt for the digital one because I prefer actual numbers rather than trying to guess or figure out which of the segments the gauge is pointing at. Then in the center of the speedometer, I've got an information display. I can scroll through the various different options using the D-pad here on the left of the steering wheel, and it tells me at the moment that I've got 32 miles until my battery is completely empty, and I've got 313 miles until the petrol tank is empty. I haven't burnt a whole lot of petrol driving this car. Unlike the XC90 T8 Recharge, which I had last week, this car has spent most of its week in fully electric mode. And that's really important to note, because while on paper this car has about 40 miles of electric range, I've managed to get it as high as 50. And as I said earlier, there's plenty of power at the wheels because this has all electric all-wheel drive. That means you can accelerate off the line nice and briskly. Sure, it's not as fast as some pure electric cars out there, but it's still very competent in its acceleration, and it's a joy to drive. Gear selector is a standard gear selector. There's none of this wheel or weird things that you get in a lot of EVs. And for regular car drivers, I think this is a bonus. An old-fashioned automatic gear selector. You pull it back for drive, you push it forwards for park. And there's a neat feature on the center console here. If I move into D, it automatically gives me an overhead view of where the car is, but it also displays the view out of the front of the vehicle. If I switch to reverse, you get the reversing noise, which sounds like a chorus of angelic voices, as well as the rear camera. You can change the various camera options using the menus in the infotainment system, but what's important here is that the car can be set up, as I have right now, so that when you're traveling at a slow speed or you are stopped, the camera automatically switches over. And I think that is an excellent safety feature. It's also useful if you want to do any slow off-roading, which brings me to the various drive modes that this car has. You'll notice there's a cluster of buttons to the left of the gear selector. Once you are in drive, you can choose between Eco, which you turn this dial to the left. That gives you a more efficient air conditioning setting, so you're using less energy for the air conditioning. It also remaps the throttle response, gives you a nice strong regenerative braking. Then you push it for a normal everyday driving mode, and if you want to be sporty, you turn it to the right. When you activate the sport mode, the gauges on the cluster change, so the speedometer changes to red. If you want eco mode, it goes green, and when you're in normal mode, the speedometer is in white. Then you've got your auto EV HV button, which you can switch on. When you turn the car on, it will default to all electric operation, so it will only use the battery until the battery is depleted, and then the car will operate as a hybrid vehicle. But by pressing this button, you can override and tell the car to pick which version of operation is best for any given situation. For example, if you're traveling on the highway at speed, you may find it beneficial to operate in hybrid rather than EV mode. I personally don't think that's the case, and I would rather completely empty my battery and then make the car run as a plug-in hybrid. Up front, you've got dual zone climate control, as well as, in this variant, heated and cooled ventilated front seats. And the ventilation is a very nice function. I've been enjoying that and the heated seats this week, but you also have the option of having the separate air conditioning options for yourself and the front passenger because of that dual zone climate control. Unlike a lot of cars on the market today, I do like these air vents. They're very easy to use and direct, and they're not hidden away. They're just air vents, and Toyota has embraced that design aesthetic. In terms of what the cabin looks like, there's nothing here that really irks me in any way. I'm not a huge fan of this display being lifted up so high, but actually when I'm driving, it's a lot easier for me to look at and interact with this touchscreen display than it would be if it was lower down. Let me turn the car back on. Now you can see how it operates. Typical RAV, lots of beeps and boops. This is quite common with Toyota vehicles. You get the Toyota splash screen and then you're straight into the system here. Now I will note that the resolution of this system feels kind of outdated. This navigation system here on this JBL touchscreen display feels old hat. It feels like it's 10-20 years old, and the response of the system is not the fastest. Luckily though, you can use Android Auto or Apple CarPlay. There's a USB socket hidden just underneath the air conditioning stack, and you use that to plug your car in. I've not got wireless CarPlay or Android Auto to work. There is an inductive charger. I'm not sure if that is, available with this car or not, but I've just been using a USB cable. I prefer that. I find the system is much more responsive and reliable in that way. But certainly the resolution of this display and the quality of the cameras all the way around, they're not the best. But then again, this is a budget-oriented car. This car is fully kitted out with all the bells and whistles. It's got a really nice sound system. It's got all of the extra alerts and warnings. And you've got paddle shifters, which seem to give you a little bit more of a sporty vibe if you want to drive in hybrid mode and have a little bit more power. I will tell you that if you engage trail mode and then you engage manual mode and then you force the car into hybrid mode and you've engaged sport mode, it is possible to squeal the tyres in a straight line. Much fun was had. Now, unless I'm very much mistaken, the RAV4 Prime has a CVT gearbox, and so it doesn't really have gears in a traditional sense, but you can use these to adjust your gear, your faux gear that you're in when you are in sport mode, where you tap the gear lever to the left, and then you can select which of the gears you want. It used to be that mirrors on cars were kind of boring affairs, but this car has got a very high-tech mirror. You flip this little switch, which used to be for dimming the mirror at night time, and it engages a camera in the tailgate, so you can see the view from the rear of the car. If you flip it back, you get the standard out the rear window view, and I prefer it in this setting because I don't have to adjust my focal length to see out the rear window because physics, whereas if I select the virtual display mirror, then I do have to refocus between that and the road ahead, and that can get quite tiresome. You also get HomeLink as standard on this particular version of the car, although I don't think it's available on the SE. Finally, let's talk about this tilt and slide sunroof. It's a moonroof, and you can activate the shade and it comes all the way through to the top, or if you prefer, you can actually have it open all the way to the back of the vehicle. Let's take it for a drive. I've been driving the RAV4 Prime now for a week, and it feels like a car that I could very easily get used to driving on an everyday basis. Sure, it's not as premium or as luxurious as some of the cars I've driven of late, but it feels very approachable. It doesn't have the best sound deadening. There's a lot of noise from the moonroof. That's if you have that as an option. You can just get a regular steel roof as well. But the car itself feels like a car that you can live life with without worrying about damaging the high-end leather trim, or without causing bits to cost you thousands of dollars to repair, which is ultimately what you have with high-end vehicles. Because the RAV4 Prime has a little less luxury interior than some other cars I've driven, you will notice more rattles and squeaks than you would in, say, a more premium car. But at the end of the day, this is a Toyota and it's not designed to be a premium car. Sure, the seats are plush enough, they support my weight well, and they're electronically adjustable. There's also adjustable lumbar support, and as I've already mentioned, you have heating and cooling, certainly in this trim variant. But it's not a car that's designed to cocoon you from the outside world. It's a car that allows you to experience the outside world. And I think that's a really important differentiation to make. Some cars that you get into are about keeping you cosseted from the outside world, keeping you in serenity and calmness while you happen to be driving along. The Prime is a car that wants to take you somewhere and wants you to be part of the journey too. It's a workhorse and a practical ride. There's nothing particularly unpleasant about this vehicle. And that's not to say it's benign and normal, more that it's competent, perfunctory, but in a very eminently approachable way. A lot of electric cars, a lot of plug-in cars in general, have so many gadgets and bells and whistles that the driving experience is lost to the novelty of the drivetrain. Either the steering is super lightweight and you can't feel what's going on with the road, or it's super sporty and everything is stiffened up. But Toyota has really managed to get the handling of the RAV4 Prime well dialed in. The steering has just the right amount of weight to it. It's not so lightweight that I'm not entirely sure what's going on, and it's not so heavy that it feels unpleasant to get round a corner. I'm really able to feel where the tyres are at every opportunity. And the suspension, again, is not too firm and not too soft. It's soaking up most of the bumps with ease. And while the seats are not plush affairs that you might find on more expensive models, it certainly feels like a comfortable ride. Driving along these country roads just west of Portland, I'm reminded how much I like small compact cars. The RAV4 Prime doesn't feel so big that it's causing me a problem in terms of getting around corners or using it to nip round country lanes. It's chuckable. And while you do get a little more body roll in the corners than you would with some other vehicles, especially with an electric car because it's got less mass down low and it's obviously got the mass of the engine up front, it still has get up and go. My foot is flat to the floor right now, 40, 50. That's not bad. I really like how quickly it picks up, and while it doesn't have the most powerful motors and doesn't have the most responsive feel, it's small enough that what power it does have feels nimble enough. The steering is nice and direct. I've got a weighted feel to the wheel. It doesn't feel so light that I feel disconnected from the road ahead, and it's got enough weight that when I go around a corner I can feel where the tires are. And I think that's something that we forget when we're making cars with all these gadgets and doodads in, especially with the EVs, that they're cars and they still need to be able to drive well. If you've driven a Toyota Prius or any Toyota hybrid, the noises that emit from the drivetrain of the Prius Prime will feel very familiar to you, but without any of the over-the-top nerdiness and gadgetness of the Prius. Don't get me wrong, I've owned 3 Prius in my lifetime, but this car doesn't have all of the weird gauges and clusters front and center that you get certainly in the more recent Prius. And I like that. It makes this car feel so much more approachable. The plug-in hybrid drivetrain is secondary to the driving experience. And I think for a lot of people, that will be a really important thing to note. You could get behind the wheel of this car and not even realize it was a plug-in hybrid, and I think you'd still feel confident driving it. It doesn't try to blind you with science. There's no fancy screens. Sure, you can look for them and you can see them if you spend enough time hunting, but it's not a screen that makes you feel like you absolutely must have X, Y, and Z on display. Obviously, being a plug-in hybrid, it doesn't have single pedal driving. However, I have used the paddle shifters to increase the regen braking, which you can do by using the minus and the plus buttons to give you more regenerative braking. One of my criticisms of the RAV4 Prime would be a criticism of a RAV4 in general, and that is that when you open the windows and the sunroof, you do get a significant amount of cavitation. Basically, the standing waves that are generated by the wind blowing into the cabin, and that can make it a little unpleasant. The RAV4 is a very practical everyday car, and lots of people own them. They're very popular amongst adventure outdoorsy types. And I would suggest that this plug-in hybrid is going to be really popular with people who enjoy the outdoors but don't feel that they're able to make that full jump to an electric vehicle yet. And because this has an 18 kilowatt hour battery pack, it's an eminently approachable car. Let's not forget, the original Nissan Leaf had a 24 kilowatt hour battery pack. That's not much larger than the battery pack in this vehicle. And this vehicle is capable of between 40 and 50 miles in all electric range. By the time we sold our Nissan Leaf, it too was capable of about 50 miles of range. We could get 60 or 70 if it was a really nice day and we drove very carefully. But when you think about the comparison between the range of that car and how we'd view that today and this car, and how a lot of people say that 40 miles is simply not enough, then I would respectfully suggest that while it might not be for them, for a lot of people, it really is. Plug-in hybrids, as you know, don't always have the best emissions, and that is because plug-in hybrids don't turn their engines on until the battery pack is empty, by which point the chances are they're almost at the end of their route. And so the engine never gets warm, and so the engine never is at its most efficient, and it's never at its least polluting. And for that reason, a lot of plug-in hybrids get a lot of bad rep. The Volvo I drove last week, I would find that the engine would come on just before I'd finished a trip, and that's a case in point, because it had a limited range battery pack, and frankly, it was just enough range to get you used to wanting to drive electric, but not enough range to be any use. One of the things that I always forget to mention when I'm doing a review like this is what my overall efficiency has been. Now, I've driven this 300-400 miles while I've had it, and I'm averaging about 3.1 miles per kilowatt hour. Bear in mind, though, that I've been driving this pretty sportily and not necessarily in my usual manner, which is fairly economical if truth be known. But 3.1 miles per kilowatt hour for a vehicle that aerodynamically is not very good, that's not too bad. And at the end of the day, if someone can genuinely get 40 miles out of this without breaking into a sweat, and I truly believe they can, then I think most people will use this in all electric mode most of the time. We're going on to a gravel track now, so I'm going to engage trail mode to give you an idea of how useful it is. When you are on a gravel trail, the trail mode gives you instant power and torque, and it gives you all-wheel drive. Now I can show you this by going into the info screen, and then I can show you on the eco mode, and you'll see that both the front and rear motors are working in concert as required to deliver power to the vehicle. When slowing down, both motors also act in concert to give you regenerative braking capabilities. This will be very familiar to you if you've driven a Prius before. This is the power window that shows you where all of the power is going. It's got a picture of the engine, it's got a picture of both electric motors and the battery. Priuses, since the original Prius back in 1998, they've all had this, and this iteration I think is one that I could live with. It's far better than the floating display that the old Prius used to have. In trail mode, the mudguards on the RAV4 Prime really help avoid any stone chip damage, and right now I'm not really going particularly fast, but fast enough to kick up a dirt cloud behind me. This is not an off-road trail, I should note. This is just one of the local gravel tracks not far from where I live, and in trail mode, the car is very well behaved. It's giving me plenty of torque, plenty of grip. I don't feel that the car is going to slip out from underneath my control. Now, the entire filming session that I've done today has required no petrol whatsoever, and that's kind of my case in point. We've travelled to a place not far from where I live, and we were able to get there in electric mode, and I've been able to get home again in electric mode. And that's frankly how I like it, because the less petrol I burn, the happier I become. So there you have it, the RAV4 Prime. I've got to admit, I am impressed. Not by the fact that this only has 40 miles of electric only range, 50 if you're very gentle, or the fact that it's a plug-in hybrid, because plug-in hybrids have always been compromised cars by their very nature. They've got a limited all-electric range, and then they bring all of the bad things about petrol back to the table when your battery pack is depleted. And it's not like this is any cheaper than an all-electric version. The base entry-level model of the RAV4 Prime starts from about $38,000 US, and if you get this version with all of the extra bits, you're looking at closer to 48. And for that money, you could just buy an all-electric model. There are now plenty of mid to long-range electric cars on the market that have a similar kind of functionality. They may not have the off-road capabilities, they may not have the towing capabilities, at least technically on paper, but they are all electric. But that doesn't mean I don't like the RAV4 Prime, because I think this is the most competent plug-in hybrid I have driven for a really long time. I have a short list of plug-in hybrids that I really love. At the top of the list is the second generation Chevrolet Volt. That is how a plug-in hybrid should be built. All electric range for up to 50 miles, maybe even 80 if you're very gentle with the accelerator. And then you have a petrol engine to help you for longer distance trips. And it had a 6 kilowatt onboard charger in the latter years of its life. The Prime has a similar setup, a competent, powerful, all-wheel drive motor setup, 18.1 kilowatt hours of lithium-ion battery, and the ability to have 6.6 kilowatts of onboard charging capability. But I'd rather see this as an all-electric vehicle. I'd rather see Toyota make the motor more powerful. I'd rather see Toyota put an 80 kilowatt hour battery and see what this could really do. But I know, I'm asking for the moon on a stick, especially from Toyota. Should you buy a RAV4 Prime? Well, it's fun, it's functional, and it's not ostentatious. There is nothing about the interior of this vehicle that is over the top or too expensive. And I like that, because it means that this car is designed for practicality first and foremost. And as you know, that's something that I am very passionate about. If you asked me, should I buy one, and you lived in a major city with plenty of public charging, I'd probably say no. But imagine if you live in a part of the world, part of the US, part of Europe, where charging stations are not that common, where there aren't that many DC quick charging stations. Then this could be a great way for you to get into plug-in vehicles. 40 miles of all-electric range should be enough for most people's daily commutes. I've seen 50 miles out of this vehicle on one occasion, and that is incredibly impressive. There are also people for whom stopping to recharge is not practical. Maybe you have an elderly relative that you need to be able to see farther away than the range of an electric car, and you need to get there quickly. Or maybe you have a child who has medical conditions who you need to be able to get to hospital regularly and back without stopping to refuel. And in that case, maybe this car would be a good solution for you. And I want to finish by reminding you of one very simple thing. We're all very different, all of us. We all have different tastes, we all have different hobbies, we all have different pastimes, we all have different things that we hold to be important. And if somebody is going to buy a plug-in hybrid because either they don't have access to off-street charging every day, or they need the flexibility of a plug-in hybrid, or for whatever other reason that they haven't yet gone fully electric, I feel confident recommending they buy this, because this is a great first plug-in car without going fully electric. Yes, I know, plug-in hybrids emit more carbon dioxide than a lot of other vehicles if they are driven poorly. But if you know how to drive this, you know how to keep it running, you know how to drive it to efficiently get the best range out of it, then this is a great car. In an ideal world, everybody would be driving an EV, but we're not there yet. And for people in that situation, this is by far the most practical, the most enjoyable, and the most usable plug-in hybrid I have ever driven. That's it for today. As always, thanks to the folks on my right for being our $15 to $49 a month Patreon supporters. Special thanks to our $50 a month patrons: Anonymous Freak, Regine Fellows, Gordon C, Paul Conway, Laura Sanborn, Anthony Coates, Denny Hyde, Sean Ueda, and Tesla in the Gong. And our deepest gratitude to our $100 a month Patreon supporters: John Lyons, Marcel Ward, Reggie Watts, JB Fagerback, Will Graylin, and Ian. If you would like to join the ranks of wonderful Patreon supporters, you'll find links below to Patreon, as well as Bitcoin and Ko-fi. You can chat with the team and other TE fans over at Discord. And if you'd like to buy some TE swag, just point yourself over to our Redbubble store. Thanks for joining me. I'm Cold, and as always, keep evolving.